Hey, what's up guys? It's Pedro here from noobcoder.com and welcome to part 9 of my tutorial series on authentication and authorization with the MERN Stack. And in this tutorial, we're going to be finishing up the series by protecting our routes. Now, before we actually talk about protecting our routes, there's actually one more component that we need to create, and that is our admin component. So I'm just going to hit Control B to bring up the Package Explorer. We are going to go to the Components folder, right click, New File, and we're going to create a file called Admin. Now, this is more or less just a filler component. So this component is just going to display that it is an admin page. So we are going to go to the Home component because this is also a filler component. We are just going to copy all this, go to Admin. Let's paste this in here. And instead of home, we'll say admin. And we'll call this admin page. And we'll also change this home to admin as well. Okay, so we saved that, and that's pretty much all I wanted to do for that. All right, so now all that's left to do is we need to import it. So let's come up here and we're going to say import admin from our components folder. Okay, next we need to create a route for it. So we'll just come down here and we'll say route, give it a path of admin. And the component that we want to render is our admin component. All right, so now let's save this and let's bring in our application. So I have this up and running. So what do I mean by protecting routes? Well, right now we have a bunch of routes, but anybody can go anywhere. So for example, if this user who isn't logged in wants to go to the admin page, he could go to the admin page. There's nothing stopping him. If he wants to go to the to-dos page, which only logged in users should see, again, there's nothing stopping him. Now we're getting an error because we're not logged in, but the point I'm trying to make is that a user who isn't logged in should not have access to these pages. So that's what I mean by protecting routes. And in order to protect a route, what we're going to do is create a couple of higher order components. So let's go ahead and do that. And before we actually do that, I actually made a diagram real quick. So right here we have authenticated. So these are the two pages that I want to protect if you are authenticated. So to-dos should be accessed by users who have the user role of user or admin. And the admin page, I put little stars here, should only be accessed to users who have the role of admin. So these are the authenticated pages. Now the unauthenticated pages is login and register. So if you're logged in, I don't want you to be able to go to the login page, right? It doesn't make any sense. Or if you're logged in, I don't want you to register a new account because that doesn't make any sense either. And finally, we have one for everyone. So our home component is not going to be protected by our HOC because we want everyone to have access to this page. All right, so now what I want to do is let's actually create our HOC. So I'm going to hit Control B to bring up the Explorer. We're going to go within the source directory and we're going to create a new folder. So we'll call this HOCs for higher order components. And the first component that we're going to create is going to be called PrivateRoute.js. And this HOC is to protect the components that you need to be logged in for. So I'm just going to hit Control B. Let's get rid of that. Come up here. I'm going to say import React. And what we're going to do is pull out the use context hook. And we're going to say from React. Next, we need to import from our React router. So what we're going to do is pull out the route component and we are going to pull out the redirect component. And we're going to say from React router DOM. And finally, our last import is going to be the context. All right, so now I'm going to say const private route, and this is just going to be a function that takes in props. And now this is where the fun stuff begins, okay? So instead of just accepting props like so, what we're going to do is do some destructuring. So let's remove that, and we're going to destructure the props that is going to be passed in. So the first thing we're going to do is pull out the component, and we are going to rename it to component with a capital. And the reason for that is it's actually required by React that components need to be capitalized. Like, for example, you see private route is capitalized. Okay. Next, what we're going to do is we are going to pull out an array called rows. Okay. This is going to be within props. And what rows is the rows that you want to be able to access this particular route. Okay. Next, we're going to use the rest parameters, and we're just going to say ... rest. Okay. Now what this means is I want you to collect all the properties that you're not pulling out here, and I want you to store it within this variable called rest. Okay. So now we're going to come down here and we're going to say const, and we are going to pull out is authenticated. And we are going to pull out user from the context. So we're going to say use context, and we're just going to pass in auth context. Okay, so we obviously need these from our global state. So we need to check to see if the user is authenticated, and this is the user himself. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to say return. And from here, we're going to use our route component. And what we're going to do is pass the props. So our props are within our rest variable that's up here, okay? So we're going to pass this rest as props. And this time we're using the spread operator. So it's going to copy these properties within this object into this new object here, okay? Next, we're going to have a prop called render. And this is going to take in a callback. So we're going to have props here. And this is going to be a function. Now within this function is where we're going to decide what to render. So now what I could do is check the global state. So is authenticated. And based on this, I'm going to redirect to where we need to go. Okay. So I'm going to say if the user is not authenticated, what we're going to do is just return the redirect component. And we need a place for that person to return. So we're going to say path name, and this is where the user is going to be sent to if he is not authenticated. So we are going to send them to the login page, basically. And we can also pass the state. And within this state, we could pass an object that says from, and we can say props.location. Okay, and this is obviously going to say where this individual is coming from. So let's make this all on one line, just to make it easier to see. And let's just close this. Okay, so now before I actually go any further, and there's a lot more code we need to write for our private route, but let's save this for now. And let's actually use this portion of it, okay? So in order to do that, we actually have to export this. So we'll just say export default, and we'll say private route. And let's save this. Let's go to our app.js file. And now instead of saying route and then to-dos and route and then admin, what we're going to do is use our private route. So let's actually import it first. So I'm going to say import private route from, and we need to go within our HOCs, and we'll bring in private route. Okay, so we come down here, and let's just squeeze in here. Now we're going to say private route, and private route is going to take in the same props of our regular route. So we're passing in the path, and the path we want is to-dos. The component that we want to render, which is to-dos. And let's just close this. And I want to pass in another prop called rows. So we are just going to squeeze in here. We're going to say rows. And this is just going to be an array of the rows that you want to be able to access this to-dos component. So the rows that we want is you should be a user, or you could be an admin. Okay, so we don't need this anymore. And we would do the same thing for the admin panel, but let's actually test this out real quick. So I'm just going to save this, and let's actually see if it's working. So here's our application. Right now we're protecting the to-dos page. So right now I'm not logged in, so I should not be able to go to the to-dos page, right? So we'll / and we'll say to-dos, hit enter, and there you go. You see it's working. It sees that we're not logged in, and it immediately redirects us to the login page, okay? So let's head on back to our private route because there's more stuff that we need to do. All right, so if we get past this if condition, that means we are effectively authenticated. So what I'm going to do is let's come down here, and we're going to write another condition, and I'm just going to check to see if the user has the correct row. So we're getting in from props an array of rows, and what this rows array is going to contain is all the rows that you want to have access to this component, okay? So basically we're going to check to see if the user row is not included within that rows array. So I'm going to say if the row is not included, so we're going to say rows.included, and we're going to pass in the global state. So the global state is here, the user. This user has a property of role. So if this returns false, that means that we need to redirect them once again because they do not have the correct row in order to view this page. So we're going to come down here, and I'm actually just going to copy this. So let's copy this. And instead of sending them to the login page because they're already authenticated, what we'll do is we'll send them to the home page, okay? So now if they actually get past this condition, that means that they are authenticated and they had the correct role in order to view this page. So what we can do is actually render out the component that was being passed in. So we're just going to say return component, and we are going to pass in the props. Okay, so we're just going to copy that over, and the props that we're passing in is here. So we're just using the spread operator to copy over the props into the component that we want to render. In this case, this is going to be the to-do component. All right, so now let's save this. So we're completely done here for our private route. Let's head over to our app.js, and we're going to need to wrap our admin route. So what we're going to do is let's just copy this. Let's save some time. And we're going to change the path to admin. But this time under roles, what we're going to do is we don't want the user role to be able to access the admin panel. So we're just going to remove it. And we'll change this to render the admin component. Okay, so we could get rid of this. And what we can do is let's test this out. So I'm going to bring in our application and we are getting an error. So let me just bring this here. So rows included is not a function. So let's go back to our private route. And this should not be rows included. This should be rows includes. All right, so now let's save this. And there you go. So I already logged in, so I'll log back out and we'll sign back in as pager123. And I believe this user is a role of user. So I'm signed in. You can see that we do not have an admin link up here, so that's good. So if I try to cheat the system and let's say I want to go to admin, there you go. I get redirected back to the home page. And I'll log out, and this time I'll log back in. And what I'm going to do is, as pager1234, and this is an admin user, we'll log in. You can see we get the correct nav bar. So we get to-dos and admin. And if I click admin, we can go to the admin page. Okay, so we solved one problem, but we haven't fixed everything. And now, because a logged in user can now go into the login page, and we don't want that to happen. So here, you can see that I typed in login. So right here with our URL, and the login component is being rendered. Now, obviously, since I'm logged in, I do not want to see the login component. And if I go to register, you can see that the register component is being rendered even though I'm logged in. So let's actually fix that by creating another higher order component. So this is basically going to do the opposite of what the private route does. So let us open the package explorer and we'll come in our HOCs folder, say new file, and I'm just going to call it unprivateroute.js. And instead of typing everything out, we are just going to copy everything from our private route. Okay, hit Control B to get rid of the Explorer. And we're going to have to change this to unprivateRoute. And we'll export unprivateRoute. And we can get rid of roles. We don't need it since we're not checking if the user is logged in. And we can get rid of user. So we only care if the user is authenticated or not. So that's why I'm getting rid of the user. Okay. So everything should be the same, except let's change this to if the user is authenticated. What we're going to do is redirect them to the home page. And we can get rid of this. We're not checking roles. Okay, so let's go over this. So if the user is authenticated, we are going to redirect them to the home page. Otherwise, what we're going to do is just render out the component. Okay, so pretty similar. So let's save this, and we're going to have to go to our app.js. And the same thing that we did for to-dos and admin, we're going to have to wrap that unprivate route around login and register. Okay, so we'll come down here and we're going to import it. So now all that's left to do is to actually use it. So I'm just going to come up here, and this time we're going to say unprivateRoute. The path we're going to give it, and the first one is going to be login, followed by the component that you want to render. And we're going to render the login component. Okay, so that's all we need. And we'll get rid of this. And we pretty much just copy and paste this because we're going to do the same thing for register. And we're going to change this to register. And the component we're going to render is register. Okay, so all that's left to do is to save this and let's test it. So I have my application here. We're going to log in. And it doesn't matter who we're logged in as. So we're logged in, our to-do is loaded. And now we're going to check to see if we could go to the login page. And it redirects us to the home page. And you could expect the same exact result if we were to check the register component. So that pretty much wraps up this tutorial series, and I hope you guys learned something.